Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a quorum now. Thank you all for being here for the Complex Rehabilitation Technology and Wheelchair Repair Advisory Council meeting. My name is Jonathan Slifka. I'm one of the co-chairs of the council, representing the Department of Aging and Disability Services. Before we get into the meat of the meeting today, I just want to say a couple of things, opening comments, and to set some expectations for today and for going forward. The first is, as we all know, we have a final report that is due at the end of every year, the beginning of the next calendar year. We have reached out to the legislative attorneys, and we've learned that for this report, since we are a very new group, we essentially can give them a summary of our findings for this year, and just let them know basically that we've only met 3 or 4 times, and we, going into next year, will look to determining patterns, establishing if there are any trends, looking into that, and look to prepare and propose recommendations in the next calendar year. We don't necessarily have to do that for this year, since we are very new in our establishment here. Did I get all that right? Perfect. Thank you. The second thing is we received some new information from LCO with reference to 3 specific sections of the bill. And so I just want to read through an email that we received from LCO on those sections and with that information. So the first question that was posed to them was, please confirm when the 10-day clock for repairs begins. We believe it begins after prior auth and when all parts are received. And the answer we received from LCO was that the 10-day clock begins once the requirements are fulfilled. So once prior authorization is received and the parts are delivered, that is when the clock begins. So that is the first question. The second question was for section 116, the definition of wheelchair, was the intent to also include scooters. And the answer was that the general statutes do not define scooters directly. However, in the bill, it also includes CRT devices, which is defined in the statutes. Excuse me. But when it comes to this bill or act, it only refers to wheelchairs. So the short answer to their question is no, it does not cover scooters. And then the final question was with respect to year-end reporting, section 2D. We believe that the intent of this section is to provide reporting to the advisory committee for Medicaid recipients only. Is this correct? And the answer that we received is yes, this is correct. It is only for Medicaid recipients, but I understand how the language can come off as confusing. So given this new information, which just was received within the last handful of days, let's go into today with the understanding that the reporting, the numbers that we will have received from the industry will not necessarily reflect this accurately, but going forward, it hopefully will. And certainly, if there are other questions, we can address those directly with the legislator and LCO through the chairs, which leads to my next couple of comments. First is just a reminder that any correspondences, any questions that you have, whether it's for the legislators, LCO, the industry, so on and so forth, please, again, direct those questions to the chairs specifically, and we will make sure that those questions get directed to the proper individuals going forward. And then finally, just again, moving forward, let's also remember that this group, this advisory council, we are operating under a very specific piece of legislation. And so within our meetings, let's make sure that any questions that are asked of either the industry or the agencies, et cetera, are specific to that legislation and appropriate to that legislation. In the last meeting, I feel that there were some questions that were outside of the scope of the legislation. And so we just need to make sure that we stay within the confines of the legislation when we're asking questions, and Maureen and myself will jump in if we feel that there are any questions being asked that are inappropriate. So with that being said, those are all of my remarks. I don't know if you have anything
All right. First of all, thank you all for your patience with our late start. As Jonathan has stated, we do have a lot to talk about today. And I think at our last meeting, things got a little contentious, and I just want to remind everyone, I think we're going to be in disagreement with some of the things that we're talking about today. So just want to remind everyone that we expect everyone to treat each other with respect. And I know last year you were able to do so, and we just would like to continue in that strain. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, we will move on to the item number 3 on the agenda, the approval. Yes, Mr. Taubman.
Sorry, I'm sorry I was late also, so I missed the very beginning there. But with regard to those 3 interpretations, first, with regard to the statutory, the duty of reporting, and it does seem correct that the reporting on the data is limited to Medicaid by statute. But the duty of timeliness applies across the board, including to Medicaid. And also, the fact that the legislature's, the language doesn't require reporting outside of Medicaid doesn't mean the council can't recommend it and request it, as we have. So I don't think that interpretation, which I think is correct, really bears on anything. The other interpretations, however, are frankly indefensible, and particularly the critical one, the 10 business days. According to the official report of the Office of Legislative Research, which really is controlling here, they say that under sections 1 and 2 of the Act, the requirement is that as soon as practicable, but not later than 10 business days after the consumer requests the repair, is when the repair must be done. And it says, however, there's an exception, according to OLR. Any time spent waiting for prior authorization or for delivery of needed parts ordered for the repair does not count towards the 10-day limit. So that means that 10 days does start, just like the statute says, from the time of the request. It's just that you subtract or you should add that it was 10 business days to complete the repair from the time the person calls. You add in the number of days waiting for prior auth. You add in the number of days waiting for the parts to arrive. The interpretation that you referenced is just contradicts the Office of Legislative Research, which is controlling on what the statute means. And then the other one is scooters. The definition of wheelchairs in the Act is extraordinarily broad. It says a manual or motorized wheeled device that enhances the mobility or positioning of an individual with a disability and includes, not limited to, includes a complex rehabilitation technology wheelchair. So that has to include a scooter. It's so broad. Now, some of the statute talks about CRT and it's limited to CRT. For example, the duty to go out and to repair the community, that's limited to CRT. But the timeliness uses the term wheelchairs. And wheelchairs, by this definition, include scooters. So those other interpretations are just not defensible.
Thank you, Mr. Taubman. And before we get too deep into that discussion, those are not questions that either Maureen or myself are prepared to answer. What I can tell you is that Representative Gilchrist has offered that if we'd like to bring in legislators and LCO into a future meeting to discuss the legislation and to determine, again, everything that is intended within the legislation legally, et cetera, she would help us facilitate that meeting. So
that would make sense if it was OLR, Office of Legislative. LCO is really not the right department of the legislature. The nonpartisan Office of Legislative Research, which is charged with interpreting bills and new law, that's the people who should be at the table.
I can certainly speak to her and get back to her and see if OLR could be part of that meeting as well. But I know that the initial discussions happened between representatives from Human Services and LCO directly. So I'm happy to get back to her and work on trying to to schedule that meeting. What I do know is it wouldn't be able to happen until after the election for obvious reasons, but certainly that's something I can work on just so that we get the right people at the table to have this discussion rather than trying to figure out things out amongst ourselves. Ms. Garland.
Just to very briefly, add on to what Sheldon was saying and to confirm what you're saying about, I think it would be, beneficial to have this conversation because I'm fairly concerned at this point that we apparently need to bring in legal experts to have a conversation about a fairly cut and dry interpretation of the law. I mean, the definition of timely repair is laid out extremely blatantly, extremely clearly, as is wheelchair. And the fact that that has become somehow a debate, I find like really disconcerting. And yeah, I think that it would be really, really spectacular to be able to have a conversation with whoever we need to as soon as is practical, because something is amiss. So that would be great. Please and thank you.
Certainly, we will work on that when this meeting is over. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Mhm. Anything else? Yes, Mr. Pursuit.
Just on the record, I'm also dismayed because the statute seems plain to me in its meaning.
Thank you.
Sorry, and one more thing.
Yes, Mr. Taubman.
That's obviously the three of us and probably others are in agreement about that. The statute's clear on its face, but also in terms of what would the practical effect be of the other interpretation. I believe you, John, you were on the task force, the wheelchair repair task force, when the data was presented, and the delays, the average delays were 24 to 27 days to come out just to assess it. And then another 24, 27 days to repair. Oh, sorry, I'm wearing a mask. Yeah, apologies. And so there's those delays are entirely theirs, not the delays waiting for prior auth, waiting for parts. So, very, very long parts of the delay, 6 weeks, 7 weeks were just their delay. And under the interpretation that the industry is pushing, they have no duty to show up at any time to do assess. There's no limits whatsoever. As long as at the end of the day, when they come out, they order a part, which is almost always the case. And as long as when the part comes in, they put it in 10 business days, they've now complied with this idea of what the statute supposedly says. So it would be meaningless. It would make the council meaningless because we're basically enforcing or checking, monitoring on meeting a standard, which is really easy to meet, which they were basically already meeting. So I didn't understand, apart from the fact that the interpretation is wrong, it would make us kind of pointless.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And that's why it's important to, again, bring them to the table rather than trying to figure this out, and interpret this ourselves, and where our own interpretations could be wrong. So let's work to bring everyone to the table and, get this information verified officially by them. So. Is there anything else? Okay, if not, if we want to have a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, thank you, Ms. Mahoney. All those in favor? Aye, okay.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, so we are going to move to the reports from the OHA and the industry. And Mr. Prezio, would you like to start?
Yes, I'm happy to start. Just to start out by saying that, under statute, our office is required to collect complaints from wheelchair users and to report annually on what they mean, but at the request of the chairs, I'm reporting monthly. Unfortunately, between the last meeting and the timeline and the deadline to report for this month, we've received no cases, which based on the other data that is to be discussed today, I don't think means that we can entertain the possibility that we've solved the problem, but that the law is not adequately publicized to the affected population. So that is essentially the sum of my report.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, we'll move on to NSM. Ms. Rassicot, please.
Good morning, thank you. Just make a note, please, in a file. Sheldon, we cannot really hear what you were discussing on your side during the presentation. I know the room heard, but we did not. The one question I had for clarification from the last email on this bill, so help me understand fully, co-chairs, you're stating now that the bill is 10 days after orders received, POs and PA received, and then the other part is the Medicaid is the reporting. Because everything I pulled together is of the last interpretation, and so that's why I want to make sure I understand fully.
Yes, of course. So the most recent information that we received with respect to when the 10-day clock for repairs begins is that it begins once the requirements are fulfilled. Once prior authorization is received and the parts are delivered is when the clock begins,
Okay.
according to the most recent information that we received from LCO. And then with respect to the year-end reporting was your other question, Ms. Rascott?
Well, yeah, I just because you're saying it's Medicaid, because the reporting I'm giving today is from the last meeting, because of course it seems like everything kept moving from the interpretation. So what I'm presenting is everything.
Yes.
With the 10-day that people thought it was under eval, etc. So when we go through this for the benefit of the consumers in the room and Sheldon and group, we put everything, regardless of what plan it was, with that former interpretation of the 10-day, etc. Not to what was just now shared. So I don't, like I said, this is first time hearing this. So I'm glad because everything seems to be back and forth on this bill. So I would appreciate solidifying for us, because right now we went through a lot of work to make sure and capture all the stuff that I'm reporting today. So so let's get into it. I don't know if you want to share on the screen the report, or you would like me to share on the screen. Just to kind of go through, because I think sometimes to explain things might be better for the group to see it on the screen.
Could I just, since you couldn't hear me, I'm gonna take off my mask.
Ms. Rascott, Mr. Taubman would just like to comment since you couldn't hear him.
I think I got the gist, but I just want him to be aware we couldn't hear very well on the side, but it was pretty clear what his intent was on there. So keep in mind, Mr. Taubman, I'm reporting to the intent that you wish to see.
No, I appreciate that very much. It was the critical piece was that the Office of Legislative Research agrees with the interpretation that was discussed last week. The 10 business days starts from the time of the request and ends upon repair, and just any days waiting for prior auth or waiting for the parts to receive just are added to the 10 business days. But the clock does indeed start at the time of the request from the consumer. And we greatly appreciate that your report today is consistent with the OLR interpretation. Thank you.
So when we're looking at our data, I'm pulling all that going all the way back to July 1, so everyone would see to the current interpretation that was presented in the last meeting. So when we look at this, we've had 438 orders that we received since July 1 of the bill initiation. And I broke out here so for this group to understand what primary insurance mean was insurance that's in position 1 for the client. And so this is important because, again, going back to the data points for the year-end report, but we're reporting everything here. Of those 438 orders, we had 122 that missed one component or whatever of the timeline. That does not mean that they missed the 10-day window that was part of it. And I wanted to make sure I'm very clear with this. Of those 438, who was missed within contact of 1 business day, that was listed there. If there was any of those, 3-day evaluation of those. Of course, you're asking for how were those evaluations done? Were they remote? Were they in a facility? Keep in mind, a facility is nursing home, which also can be considered a home for the client. And then if it was in the branch, or if the evaluation was done in the client's home. And of course, if those PO timeline, if any of those missed, all the repairs that were done, were they done in the branch? Were they done or shipped to other, like typically an other or ship might just be a repair of a cushion, and we're able just to ship the cushion for the person to replace their current cushion. 28% were done in their facilities, which is a nursing home, and 64% of those repairs were done in the client's home. Now, of those 122 orders, 51 or 42% of those were at our fault, whether we missed one of those standards above, per the bill. 58% of the other orders were either outside the standard performance time because it was a request of the facility. Keep in mind, nursing facilities usually have set days they want these being done within their clients, or the client had related changes or canceled their order or changed the date time. Now, I think it's important, because this whole purpose of this bill is to improve timelines for repairs. How far out were those 122 missed? 21 days, regardless if it was MSM or client delays, I think is important still to share. 21 of those were a day missed. 11% of those were 2 days missed out. And I kind of just outlined here for interpretation and understanding of those 122 that were missed of some ship or order. But again, 51 of those 122 were our fault, meaning NSM's fault for scheduling, whatever it may be. So I think it's kind of important to know we're going in that direction to the intent. If you could go down, I want to kind of go over, because staffing and everything was brought up. What have we been doing? Now, keep in mind, this goal line moved, and we've had to invest now because of the interpretation changes from when this bill went live July 1st, even though we only had 45 days to get ready for it once it was published. We've had to go through and invest quite a bit more than was anticipated. We hired an account executive just to monitor this now, because of the goal line of the 10-day interpretation of now I have to manage when we know we get the POs in, and then try to get it scheduled, let's say within that 4 or 5 day window now of that 10-day timeline, and making it work. We've added more technicians on there. I have our supervisors now coming in from other regions just to make sure to help keep backlog, because I'm sure that's going to be brought up. It's not just the new accounts from July on. We have spec entry now, because some of the things that we brought up in the last meeting that we're dealing with our manufacturers, we have a dedicated person trying to work on those. We rerouted some zoning and training with our customer service reps, depending on where the client lives, and how to make sure our remote service evaluations beef that up again also. We are still down though, even with all of this that we've done, and we've keep hitting these lines, we're still short a technician and a customer service rep in one location and another tech. We had those openings for the past couple of months. We're having a hard time finding good people that will fit the role. But it's an ongoing issue. That's one thing I would love this committee to help us solve that problem, because it seems to be an ongoing rotating door. And then we're finalizing the IT build now with all these changes that were interpreted in the last meeting to capture all this. So now we had to rebuild our systems a little bit with this change of interpretation. So that is where we're at with those. And if we could go down to the bottom, because I know this kind of brought up, like, where are we at within Connecticut since this conversation started, even before the bill. And this is going to be hard for you guys to interpret, but I think the key thing to see on here, where you see ready to process, which is RTP to FSS, that's our funding packet when it goes to our insurance plans. That is the time, like once we got the eval done, we got the materials, because as you noticed above, well over half of our clients do have primary insurance that's commercial plans, or others that do still require us to either submit an RX or they require documentation paperwork. But the key thing too is once they approve those, how long does it take from the time we submit to get the approval? So repairs, if you look over time, now that with Connecticut removal of the PA, the timeline is like 1 or 2 days that we get wait for approval on some of those things. But the key thing to understand is from approval to the time of receipt, what you see down there. So after approval, receipt, it's a timeline of how long does it typically take us to get the products in. That's been pretty stable over the time from our manufacturers, usually up a week once we get those approvals and those in. So you see the timeline. But the key thing I think is important here, to the point that I think I heard Sheldon bring up, once we get everything in, how many days is it getting us out to get to the client to get these done? And that is the key here. Like you saw back in August, like from once we got it, it took up to 14, 3 weeks to get to the delivery. We're now down, once we get it, you go from 7 days, 5 days later, it's being delivered in that time window. And I think that's the important thing to see here, is the trend is going down, and it has been going down for the past year. Now that we got some stability going in, regardless of the bill, it was starting to go down. And if you look at the bottom part there, I wanted to put in what's our national average across the nation for us. And that's in the other chart below. So the key thing of the objective I kind of wanted to bring up is we're improving, we're going in the direction, the intent of the bill. We're still working on it, but there's a lot still to be done. And the challenges that we still deal with is still there. You know, there's things that we brought up during the hearings that seems to be missed, but we're going in the direction and intent of the bill. And I just wanted to make sure I kind of walked through all that and share that what these things all mean and where we're at with the interpretation. And now with this new one that was just presented this morning, it gives me a little bit of relief, but regardless of that, I did report to what the consumers were made in the last comments on that. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rasica. I actually do have a question, just a clarification. You mentioned nursing homes and that they're the ones who set the schedule. I just wanted to make sure that I heard that correctly.
Yeah, sometimes, because depending on our facilities, depending on the nursing home facilities and staffing for that, a lot of times they'd like to coordinate it to certain days of the week or certain times of the month time that we come in to do those services, so they have all the clients together to do it. So sometimes we're beholden to their schedule to go in and do that. So we cannot automatically, even though we may have gotten everything in, and let's say we have 4 or 5 days after we receive the product in to still meet that 10-day window, the nursing home may say, no, we can't schedule it this week. We need you to come in on Monday or Tuesday. So then that throws us out of the timeline for the 10-day.
Okay, thank you. And
You
I think
betcha.
follow under, under the law that, with a customer, not being available. Mr. Perizio.
First of all, thank you for this reporting and for reporting based on the OLR interpretation of the bill. It's very helpful. A follow-up question to Madam Co-Chairs. In your view, is it the case, and you may or may not have data on this, but is it the case that having particular service days at the nursing homes creates a service bottleneck that leads to additional delays sort of on top of just waiting for the day to open?
I'm not quite sure on that. I mean, are you talking about bottlenecks for us rescheduling for other people then around that time? Clarify your question a little bit if you could.
No, that's fine. I'm just sort of trying to tease out, do you find that it's the case that your text can get to everybody on that day or on the 2 days that the nursing home has said you can come in, or are people having to wait an additional cycle?
Well, that's hard to answer that, because that's going to be hit and miss depending on what day of the week and what it is at schedule and what facilities around the state. So I can't say here or there. And if it's our fault, that's what's being documented.
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Morgana.
It's a question for both companies. So as far as the data, when you order parts and for whatever reason a part is not correct or it wasn't delivered or it's missing or whatever, and when you have the person, they fix 1 out of 2 things, say, and they make you sign the form and then they close out that ticket and they're starting a new ticket, is that being captured? Because that may alter the data.
Well, I can't answer let me put it to you this way. So if we ordered the wrong part, that's our error. So that's being reported that way. Are you saying, David, though, if something, they discovered something during the initial repairs and we find something else that's new?
So, all right, no. So, all right, I'll just give a personal example. I just went through a repair. 2 parts were ordered. This is for New Motion, by the way. 2 parts were ordered. When they came to fix my, they were already past the 10 days, even when they came the first time. But one of the parts was the wrong size. So they fixed one thing. Then, because you have to sign off on the thing that they fixed, they end the ticket. They close that ticket. Then they start a new ticket for the outstanding thing that was wrong. So then it's kind of it's recorded differently the way I understand it. So I'm just curious, is that information being captured by both companies if that happens? Or does
Yeah, David, let me answer for me since I'm the first one presenting, and I'll let Gary get to his section. So for us, if it's on that and it's a wrong part that we ordered or the wrong size, that's not a completed repair because we had to continue on, and we do capture that. And that's part of our IT build, because we do have part of that that's being designed for all the questions that came up during the initial hearings and prep work for those. So there's various reasons, and that's a lot of IT build that we're kind of had to add to. So those are drop downs for those various things that you're outlining. That's being captured. So we'll be able to, like, in the next, hopefully in the next, although by the year end, we'll have the reasonings for some of those things. And I can share that next meeting if you guys want to see what our drop downs are, what we're capturing.
Sir Gilberty, do you want to answer?
Yeah, I mean, to Diane's point, that's still an open ticket from our standpoint. We have to have you sign off on what we already provided. It doesn't close out the ticket as far as we're concerned. And
okay,
will,
that wasn't the information provided by your branch manager, but if it's different, then that's fine.
Yeah.
So another part is when you get parts delivered and they get entered into your system, does the gap between delivery and put into your system, is that being recorded? Is that being captured in your data?
I can speak for New Motion. I mean, those are electronically received. They go right into our system when they hit our top.
So you're saying there's no gap in time when it's put into your system?
There should not be. If there is, it's ours. It's not.
So
It should not be days.
Okay, so just this last time that I just got something fixed, it was four business days that it took from when it
Yeah.
was delivered. So 4 business days, 6 real days by the time it was delivered,
Yeah.
to put in the system. So how often
David,
does that happen?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that situation, and that is somebody missed it on the dot. The part
Okay.
that somebody missed it. That was a human error. That was not a systematic error. And what happened is somebody put it on the shelf. They did not scan it, and so the part was kind of lost on the shelf. So I apologize for that. But
No,
that was,
and I'm just using my personal example just to kind of get the information. And I'm just curious if that happens often. It doesn't sound as it happens often. I'm just curious if it's being recorded and documented, because that causes delays. And I'm curious how often it happens, and does that cause significant delays in repairs? That's why I'm asking the question.
What happens with our system, David, is when the item hits the dock, the warehouse tech receives it, they scan it into the system, and that triggers the system to say, we have this, we need to schedule it. And what happened in that case is human error. Person had 15 boxes, he scanned 14, but put them all on the shelf. And then no one was triggered to know that that item was there. Now we should go back. We have error reports that we should go back and check. So, that should not happen on a regular basis.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to jump in the conversation. I missed a note in the chat from a while back. I think that was when Jonathan was talking about the new interpretation of the law, and Ms. Johnson commented that it sounds like the scooter people are being punished. So I just wanted to make sure that's in the record. And if Michelle, if you wish to speak further on that, let us know and we'll redirect the conversation.
Our
but-
data, by the way, too, co-chairs, did include scooters.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Oh, Daryl, your hand is up.
Sure, thanks. I just wanted to say thank you, Diane, and Gary, for your transparency and, related to, just reporting the numbers and everything that way. A side comment, based off of what David was saying in reference to the when the part is delivered, I do think there is a huge gap at certain times for certain cases where we're being contacted, the consumer is being contacted. So I think that is something that really needs to be taken seriously. For my case that I reported at last council meeting, there was over 7 days, delayed to get contacted. And then on top of that, with the routing software, I think that continues to be another hurdle to getting the product to the customer and the repair completed, because I know that is something that, we don't have a tech available in that area until, another cycle comes around and they're in that area. So those are two main key points that I think we could cut down times. Thank you.
Okay.
And we are looking at that too, Daryl, just to your point about routing and scheduling. And again, we need more techs too, though, guys. I'll be honest, staffing has been a challenge. I mean, even with like I said, we're down 2 in a customer service rep, and we keep looking, and throwing money doesn't seem to matter. But we're doing what we can, and we're, like I said, we're servicing everything, and we're going to keep reporting everything that we have, including the scooters, the manual chairs, the CRT chairs. After getting this information this morning, of course, regardless, we'll still keep reporting everything for the benefit of this group to know it's going in the right direction that everyone's looking for. But just keep in mind, we're doing a lot of things that we're doing everything on the other side. The help that we need is not being recognized. But I think that's a moot point right now for this group. But I do want to say it on record. And I'm hoping this committee can help us solve some of those staffing issues, because I thought that was part of this conversation too, but it seems like it's just a one-way direction right now.
Thank you, Dan.
Hey, Mr. Morgana.
You brought up staffing issues. Can you tell us, both companies, what are your current staffing levels right now?
I reported that we're down 2 techs right now. We need to get 2 more techs and another customer service rep.
I don't want to know how many you're down. I just want to know the total of how many techs you have.
That would be 14 then. 14 on techs on there, and then, like I said, a customer service rep we're short.
We just lost a tech last week. He went to work in another industry where he's making double what we could pay him, which is part of the challenge. But we are, I believe, David, we're at 16 today. We are over where we were at the beginning of this process. We actually went heavy, but we're trying to plan for attrition. So we're a couple up above. I think we were at 13 or 14 when we started this process. So we're at 16 today.
Thank you for the answer.
Mr. Tubman.
Thank you. I've got a couple sets of questions. One about trying to understand the data, and then about the last thing, the staffing and the numbers. I really appreciate, from what you're saying, Diane, your report is premised upon what we view as the correct interpretation of the 10 business days starts from when the request is made. So when in the section under your report that's entitled, here's the data on the orders out of the 10-day window, you mean 10 business days counted from the date of request.
Correct. To your interpretation, Sheldon.
No, and the OLR interpretation. So within that, you're saying 42% of the time you did not comply with that standards, or you did comply 58% of the time.
We did comply 58% of the time. Was out of our hands, where it's a customer changed the date time to be able to meet that 10-day from whether it valid to the time we got the product into the time that needs to from the start stop of the 10 days. Okay. What we have on there is 51 of those. And I reported everything, Sheldon. I put 122 of those. But if you look at the rest of that, it's like I reported every single thing on there.
All right, so in other words, that I get it. So what you're saying, with the corrected our view and the OLR view of the 10 business days, but that when they were late, 42% of the time it was your fault, your term.
Of the 122 that were missed, please use the right numbers.
Yeah,
We
I meant
still
that.
met 300 and some orders in the timeline.
Right, of the 120, yes, of the 122.
I want to be clear here. We're going in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I understand. But 58% it was other people were behind that. And again, it's really important you did not only that, but you also include scooters in that.
Yeah,
Very-
everything. Manual chairs, scooters, anything that has wheels.
So one thing that I don't understand though is why you're in some ways making more work for yourself. There is nothing in the law that requires your second item under the heading 122 orders missed, one of the timelines below. Contacted within 1 business day of request. That's in the statute. Evaluation within 3 business days. There's no such thing in the statute. It's a good thing. I endorse.
I would go back and double check, because you had said we're supposed to make sure we're getting the eval done within that timeline of 3 business days.
No, there's nothing in there. You just have to.
Well, we're doing it and reporting it for y'all.
Then thank you. I mean, that's above and beyond, and we greatly appreciate that. The other question about the days. So looking at your chart, it is hard to read in part because my eyes are so bad, but we'll use the Connecticut service data delivery. So that word delivery starting at 12 and going across, that's days from the time the part arrived to the time it was installed.
Yeah, let me pull my chart back up. Sorry. If you want to pull that back up on the screen there for me, I just delivered it off, cleaned it off my screen. Thank you, Chandra. Yeah, so when you look at delivery, so once we get receipt, so receipt is like 7 days from authorization, or when we get the PO in, how fast did we get it from auth? I know this is our internal notes, guys. You're not going to understand this. But delivery is, so let's say I got all my parts in, Sheldon. All right. So from the part of receipt to the time it's delivery, if you look at there, I got my PO parts in. 5 days later, I have the delivery done. That's what we're averaging. This is, now keep in mind, this report, guys, is everything. It's not just wheelchairs. This is everything. This is my repairs on gate trainers, standers. This is what our average time, what I was just trying to show here from since the start of last year. This is all going in the right direction. For everything. This is everything, Sheldon. This is not just wheelchairs.
And to be clear, are these business days or calendar days?
Calendar days.
Okay, so all right. So
yeah, I mean, I'm just showing you the big overall, but I broke it down for the purpose of the bill. I wanted to show the group where we're at in Connecticut overall for all services and where we're going. And if you look at the bottom chart below, that's our national numbers.
No, I think I get it, and I appreciate it. So my other questions for it was relatively easy to follow your information, and it was relatively complete. I will say that what the question from David Morgana, we do need, and we asked for this before, and I'm going to ask for it again, regular reporting on total staff. It's interesting to know about your posting.
Why are we recording that if it's not in the bill?
Because this is a monitoring committee, and regardless of what a bill says, we're supposed to monitor, and we have the absolute right, and I would argue the duty, to suggest reporting that might be helpful to our task. If you refuse, you refuse, and that may be in our recommendations. But the request last time, David made it again, and I'm reiterating it, is to have regular reporting so we can tell. It looks like the amount of staff you have today is the same staff you had months ago. And since we all know, and it's been admitted, that the main problem is lack of staff, it's obviously important to know what the staffing levels are. So that is the request, and I'll make the request from the chairs that be a definitive request to both companies. Now, that having been said, New Motion provided exactly nothing. They didn't even, you provided, Diane, some helpful information about the supervisors, staff openings, and et cetera. The report by Gary, New Motion, provided exactly nothing on that subject. So that really needs to be addressed. But regarding the numbers, so I understand so I tried to understand the new motion report. Gary, thank you for being here. You have, I'm trying to understand, I guess the last page, which is percent of orders meeting the 10-day requirement. Now, when you say 10-day requirement, what do you mean? Do you mean the OLR interpretation, or do you mean this other interpretation that you only have to do it 10 days from the time you receive the part?
The original interpretation that we were going with, because as Diane said, I'm providing information on everything. I'm providing all payers. I'm providing all products. If we fixed it, it's in this report. So I was, the interpretation that we left the last meeting with is what I went with. Now, what I also have is a stipulation in my presentation, because we are behind the curve as far as programming our systems to give the information at the level that we need. Diane and SM had it because they needed it for another payer a while ago. But what's not in my report is situations where we either can't get a hold of the customer, or we've had issues with the manufacturer, other things that are not captured in this report. So there's a little bit of noise in my numbers, but at the end of the day, our performance has improved since we started this. Now, speaking to staffing, I didn't speak to anything of staffing in the report because that was not part of that was part of what was required of us. But I have shared with David, as he asked, what our staffing was. And I'm not trying to be evasive in any way. At the end of the day, it's all what our performance is and whether we're getting better on an ongoing basis at completing repairs. And I can walk you through my data because I haven't had that chance yet.
All right. Well, I do want to ask that, Dave, because I'm looking at it, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm seeing that heading, percent of orders meeting 10-day requirement. And it's a little hard to read because there says no and yes in the columns, but there's nothing under no. I didn't quite understand that, but I think, tell me if I have it wrong, that what you're saying is, like, let's take the last quarter 3.
Excuse me, Sheldon. I just want to, because it seems like we're going in at Gary's report. So I just
Oh.
want to make sure there are no further questions for Diane. Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, I apologize for that. So in quarter 3, 24, 982, I guess, requests, cases, says no, and 348 yes. So to me, I think what you're saying is, of around 1,300 cases, only 348 met the 10-day requirement.
That is a raw number, and that's why I put that note down in the bottom, Sheldon. We're much better than that. We're probably closer to 50%. But because our system does not capture certain exceptions in there, for instance, customer canceled or things like that, this is the raw number of days. So it's not a 100% accurate report, but we're trying to dial it in. As we've always said, we're aiming at the year-end report. We have been aiming at the year-end report, and what we're providing along the way is progress and the attempt to be better at this. Now, like I said, that's not where we want to be. That's not, the intent of the bill for us to be at that level. But I'm showing you where we are on a raw number basis. Now, if you let me walk you through the rest of my data, I'll be happy to, to help explain it.
Well, let me ask this question. Diane explained very well that of the 122 that did not meet the 10-day window, 42% were their fault, and 58%, she said, were, other things going on, right? Is that analogous here to your number? So in other words, when you look at that number and it says that, only a quarter complied, you saying it was really more like 50% when you factor in cases like Diane specified?
Correct. Yeah, we're much better than that number. And if I can go through my data, Sheldon, I'll show you where we are.
Yeah, please, Mr. Gilberti, let you go ahead and give your presentation at this point, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So let me, okay, you're going to share it. Thank you. If you scroll down to the next slide, please. Great. Thank you. So we've taken a quarterly look back to Q3 of 2023. And you can see the next column over is our summary of all order counts in the quarter. The median number is what we're working with. I think Diane's using median number. And yet this is I to C. This is total, just raw data from the time the phone call came in till the time we completed the order. And back in Q3 of 2023, that was 60 days. And we've knocked 27 days out of that. And in Q3 of 2024, we were down to 33 days. Now, again, that's a raw number. That is not taking into consideration any back and forth in the order process. That includes all authorizations and order timeliness from the manufacturer. That's the total process. If you go to the next slide, please. If you take out prior auth and order time, if you look at Q3 of 2024, we're down to 20 days. So we've made significant improvement from 40 days down to 20 days since Q3 of 2023. So we are making progress here. Now, if you could go to the next slide, please. Now, this is from the call received to eval. This is how long it takes us to get out and do the actual evaluation. And we have been at 3 days. We got some improvement in Q1 of 2024. We actually got down to a median of 1 day, and it spiked up a couple of days here just because of we've actually seen an uptick in order numbers. If you see the number of orders in a quarter from 1,037, we've seen an increase of 300 some orders per quarter, and we're still maintaining at least a 3-day P50 on from the receipt of the call to the actual evaluation. Now that includes some remote evaluations, that includes in-shop evaluations, that includes field evaluations, that includes everything, and that includes all products. And so again, we had slight uptick in that, mostly because of volume and mostly because of we did get down one tech, but I think we're still maintaining a reasonable sort of response time there. If you could move to the next page, please. Now, this is from order receipt, and this is just to show manufacturer lead times and how they have improved over the last several quarters. At Q3 of 2023, we were getting an average of 13 days. It's now down to 7 days. So we've seen a lot of improvement there from our manufacturers. There's still 1 or 2 manufacturers that still are allowing that to stay where it is. But the supply chain issues that we experienced mostly through COVID and just post-COVID has resolved in a good way. So now moving to the next one, please. Now this is our receipt to delivery, and this is the one really from the point that we receive the product to the time we actually complete the delivery. And you can see up in Q3 of 2023, we had a median of 19 days. And even with our increase in volume from about 900, almost 1,000 orders in the quarter to almost 1,300 orders a quarter, we brought that down to 7 days. And that is within in a median level, we're within the timeframes of the bill, even below it. So median is relatively 50%. So that's why I'm saying, our compliance is within the same range that Diane was saying for NSM. And I think the next page is the one, Sheldon, you already focused in on. And again, that slide itself has the noise in it of, the variations between, waiting on some quotes from manufacturers. Customer cancels the order, we had to reschedule, timeliness and trying to get a hold of the customer. And we're trying to upgrade our systems to capture that information. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Purdy. Do we have any questions? Mr. Perzio.
Thank you. And thank you for this information. I apologize that what I may be doing is asking you to explain again what you just explained, but I want to be sure that I have it right. So on, for instance, slide 4, call received to eval, the most recent quarter indicates the median number of days is 3. And then if you skip ahead to slide 6, again, the same quarter receipt to delivery, your median is 7. So you're saying that essentially, if I understand you right, 3 and 7 is 10 essentially, and that puts you within the bill for the median time. Is that?
Yes, essentially, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morgana.
So I had a question going back to the routing software. I know you use routing software to make efficient, a work day for your technicians. And you said that you have issues with people canceling or not being able to be contacted. Have you looked into, broadening the availability of days that you can go out? Because I think that does affect availability, because say it's at a certain time, because when you're called, when you make the appointment, you don't even have the day. You're given the time the night prior. And so now you have to figure it out. And so you have people who have CNAs and have, daily living situations where they have to do certain, bodily functions and getting dressed and all that. So what are you doing to look into broadening that or making exceptions for people that can't meet or be get their chair fixed in the time that you're designating?
And speaking for New Motion, I mean, we try and offer as many options as we can. I mean, we have increased our staffing, and that's one way to make more availability. Try to be flexible any way we can. I mean, I think we do the best we can with that. It's not a perfect system. Our routing software, we schedule it first and then let the routing software route it. We aren't using regional routing in Connecticut. So we're not saying we're only in certain areas on certain days. We're trying to route around the actual scheduling itself.
Okay, then there's, I guess, one other thing. How much time do you see between when you send out a request to the primary care doctor and when they respond and send the information back? Do you have information on that? I don't know if you did or not.
I did not have that in the data set. I can certainly get that, but our MedDocs team tries to be pretty timely in requesting and getting the documents. We're even using DocuSign now to try and cut that time frame down so that they can just electronically sign it.
So
So
is that when you email it to them
yes.
versus a fax? So that was good. I was going to
Yes.
bring that up because from personal experience, I've had several instances where your documents team are faxing something to the primary care doctor and they just don't get it. And on your end, you're saying that, oh yeah, we sent it and we have it received. And then I called the doctor and like, no, we didn't get anything. And I recently went through that where it went a whole week and we still didn't get it. And I said, hey, can you just email it? And it was emailed, and within 15 minutes, my doctor signed it and had it back to you. So I don't know if I think that's whatever's going on with that. I don't know how widespread it is, but it happened to me. And so I'm kind of concerned because that slows down the process for repairs as well. So are you just going to go to straight to this DocuSign and just do email?
David,
Or-
if I can answer for Gary next, because it's the same for all the companies when we deal with our referral sources. We use everything. We email, we fax, we send it all. And typically most providers have every 2 to 3 days. If we don't get documentation back, we automatically have a queue to go back to them and say, hey, we still have not received your documentation back. We still don't have the RX. We still don't have the prior auth medical docs that we need. It's a very continuous thing. And we have it also manually. People have their own check marks, so depending on the office and what is needed and who it's going to. But we all have those ticklers in there. And so if something goes more than a week's time, then it becomes an emergency alert type of thing. And that's, part of the struggle. But of course, when we do that, and if we get to the point, and Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys do the same thing. if after a week or so, we usually try to call the client and say, listen, your office is not responding to the following dates that we sent stuff. We need to get this for you. So hopefully you are getting notified like that.
Well,
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, go ahead, sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, we do, as Diane said, we have scheduled checkbacks on everything we send out. The med docs person is supposed to check their queue on a regular basis and go back to the doctor where we can. Sometimes we get bad fax numbers. We try to, if the doctor won't give us email information, we don't have an email, but we try and get everything we can.
Thank you.
Thank you for the answer.
I just want to note the time. We still have a couple of agenda items to get to, but Mr. Short has a question.
Yes, I'll make it quick. I can't speak for NSM, but I know that New Motion, when all the orders are in, when all the paperwork is in, I always get a call from them to confirm that my insurance is still the same and my address is still the same before they could proceed with ordering the part. And so I know they are contacting individuals, prior to, and being able to contact them in order to do the ordering. Is there any way that you could start scheduling at that point? And that way you already have rather than waiting another week for the part to get, into the shop and then another 10 plus business days to, just to try and cut down a couple days in the process. Just an idea there.
We are
Yeah.
doing that right now. We are what we call credit. Remember, we shared this in the last meeting. We are credit accepting, taking on that cost factor, regardless if we know we're going to get reimbursed for it or not.
No. This is after all the authorization.
No. What I'm saying, Joe, is we're doing that right now, regardless of once we get a PO in, whether or not we got it in, we're going on the books and scheduling out. That's the only way we're going to be able to do that. And that's why we have all more hands on deck. If you notice, like what we shared and what Gary shared earlier, we're having more bodies just for that extra scheduling component and trying to monitor that, because now it's taken another extra step to try to get those timelines done.
I was just throwing that out there. That's all.
Yeah, a lot of times, Joe, we do try and pre-schedule. If we have a pretty good level of confidence in how long it's going to take for the part to come in, because nothing's worth in us scheduling you and then turn around and have to reschedule you because the part didn't get there. So we're trying to, if we have a good level of confidence on the receipt time of the part, I had an issue the other day where the manufacturer told me they were going to send the part next day here and they did not. And, I had to have a difficult conversation with the customer that the part didn't get here. So, we do our best.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. We'll move on to the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Hang on for just a moment, please.
I had something else, not on this. I appreciate very much that that Adam has been producing data every month. He's not required to. So, and to Diane's point, well, why are we doing something the statute doesn't require? Well, Adam's not required to produce data every month either, and he's doing it to be helpful, I think, to our process. My question, though, is the numbers are very small. Based upon the industry's own data, that one of them says about, we don't have it, but it says about 50% of the time, about 42% of the time. The other one, they're not complying, admittedly, their own fault. And you're getting almost no complaints. And my understanding is there's been no advertising of that. At the last two meetings, I specifically, pointedly asked the industry to please put in their newsletter or somewhere to tell people about what the new law is and about how you can file a complaint with OHA. That hasn't happened. They seem to be unwilling to do it. So maybe it needs to be in one of our recommendations. But I wanted to know if there's anything that we can do is there something that members of the council can do to try to move us along? And one of the ideas I had was to ask DSS, who's at the table, I believe, not here today in the office, but, you know, something like 4,000, I think, of the folks are on Medicaid, or maybe David or Jenny, you can correct me, but it's a large number. It's 4,000 or 5,000. And what I'm wondering is that's the majority, if you include duals. I'm wondering if DSS could get something out to all of its members who use wheelchairs, where the department paid for them, and you know who they are, advising them of the new law and of the OHA. So that would be the bulk of the folks. If the industry is we can ask them, but they seem to be absolutely unwilling to do it. If they continue to be unwilling to do it, how about DSS being able to reach the vast majority?
I would just say, Mr. Tubman, before we let DSS respond, you know, again, however you feel about it, it's not required by the legislation.
Yeah, I said
Certainly
that.
certainly a recommendation that can be made going forward, and certainly not required of DSS or OHA. And I'm not here to speak for them, but again, maybe
Yeah,
along with
I
the other
said that
one,
right
it
at
would
the
be
beginning, that this
it
is
would
not
be a
required.
recommendation. Well, no, but I mean, you continue to reference that they continue to be unwilling, and I just wanted to say that's
a fact. They're unwilling.
but they are willing to do things that are required by the legislation, is what I'm saying, and they are working to work within the confines of the legislation. And so, if that's a recommendation you want to make going forward, I think that is fine. But I think to continue to bring up that they are unwilling to do something that is currently not required of them, and maybe to say it repeatedly, is a bit unfair to the industry, because again, at least as of right now, it's not required of them. But what they are working on is everything that is currently required of them. So I just want to be cautious of how we characterize that in the confines of our discussions in the meeting.
Yeah, and if I could, Congress co-chairs, I'm a little offended by that, Sheldon. I'm going to say from the provider, 89% of the repairs we've done, above and what's even now finding out today, the bill, are meeting the timelines. So the 11% that we're advertising, regardless of it, what's the goal? The goal is to get down to that timeline, and we're 89% of the way there. So if you're making it sound like we're being uncooperative and pushing back, we're going in the right direction. I don't understand this. Why this animosity? And you know, you haven't asked us from the industry. You said, what can we do to help? Well, we know staffing's an issue, but there's other states that are doing things that Connecticut's not even doing to help out with the repair process that we've been bringing up during the hearings, but no one wants to talk about that. You know, we got other states that are doing things that help out, you know, covering preventive maintenance, doing evaluations, and doing power backup repairs that would help keep the person's mobile. Connecticut's not even talking about those things. So the fact that you're saying that we're being uncooperative, we're making ourselves hit those timelines regardless of advertisement. We have to.
Yeah,
I take offense to it, Sheldon, because it's very animosity from the last
take
year, and I
offense
have to
to it.
say it.
And the co-chair may think there's a problem, but the facts are that you have been asked to do it repeatedly. That is to say, to advise your consumers about the new law on timeliness and how you can file a complaint, and you won't do it. You're right, co-chair, that that's not in the statute, but we are supposed to be monitoring and improving things. And if this is something that would help, as I think it clearly would, I think Adams last time said it would, if people knew about it, then it's a totally reasonable thing to request. And if they won't do it, it is accurate to say they are unwilling to do it. But turning to the DSS thing, I'm only asking, it's not required by the statute. I am asking DSS if they might be able to help in this.
And I will take that back, Sheldon.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Pritzker.
Related, if DSS is willing to do that, our office would be happy to coordinate with them.
Thank you. right. Yes, Mr. Morgana.
I know we're getting kind of close to the end, and I wanted to bring this up. I think due to the amount of time we're spending on this, and obviously the discussions we're having, we might want to consider adding more meetings to what we're doing now. I just don't know if we're going to get done what we need to get done in the time that we've allotted. So it's something I wanted to bring up.
Thank you. Well, I think we will be going back to work with Representative Gilchrist on planning a meeting with the legislators and at minimum LCO and OLR if we can make it happen to iron out the details and the discrepancies that we've been working under over the course of the last few months. So I think that's going to be the first meeting. I wish I could say I could schedule that meeting, but I can't. At the moment, I'll work with them to see what their availability is, and we'll work within the confines of their availability and let you know.
But I'm saying adding more meetings. I mean, like to the point where like we did last time where we were meeting like weekly or whatever. I mean, we really need to think about adding more meetings.
Well, this is an organization, Mr. Morgana, that doesn't have an ending.
Right.
Our initial report, as we discussed earlier, can say, here's our early findings. And again, we will be working in 2025 to focus on trends and patterns and come up with recommendations based on several more months of data that we see. So, I mean, I think the first thing is to set up the next meeting with, again, with the legislators and LCO and OLR to figure out what guidelines and everything we truly need to be monitoring and focusing on going forward before we can, I think, talk about whether or not we need additional meetings in the interim. But it's certainly a possibility. Yes, Mr. Chapman.
Well, my understanding is that the statute says by January 1st, the council has to produce a report and it has to include recommendations and findings, right? So that's a lot of work for you, for you guys and for everybody, and some of us will volunteer on parts or something, but that's an awful lot of work you have to get to the point of what the findings and the recommendations will be. That's a lot of discussion. And I think what David said is right. We're going to need several meetings, and that's apart from getting this interpretation nailed down, which hopefully OLR will explain why this other interpretation is wrong. But anyway, there's like all kinds of recommendations, like the ones we just talked about. Like should the industry be required to report every month its staffing levels? Should the industry be required to notify members of the new law and of OHA complaints? Those are potential recommendations. And I think we have to, but people may disagree with that, right? Maybe the industry doesn't like what I just said. And so we're going to have to work that all out. I think we're going to definitely need meetings. I think weekly does make sense in order to meet the deadline, in order for you to get the report out by January 1st with those findings and recommendations, consensus, and if there's disagreement, maybe there's, minority or position or whatever. But I think that's going to take some time. So weekly is called for.
Well, again, I think let's plan this first meeting with the legislators and OLR and LCO and get that on the books. Again, and I think you may not have been here when I made the announcement. This initial report is based on what we understand from the legislative attorneys. This initial report for 2025, because we are a new council, and again, and also some of the law isn't even in effect yet until January 1. This report is not necessarily required to be as substantive. I'm not suggesting that we don't have recommendations at this time, but it doesn't need to be in the same vein as the report from the first iteration of this group, because we will be ongoing.
Along those lines, maybe one suggestion is that we meet the deadline with what we can do, but then we do a supplemental like shortly thereafter. And I'm guessing that some recommendations might be some people might want to do legislative recommendations. And if that's the case, those really do need to go out soon. So maybe there's no time to do that, for January 1st, but maybe a supplemental report could include additional recommendations, maybe such as that.
Certainly something for the group to consider. Thank you. All right, seeing no other comments, I will reach out to Representative Gilchrist to work on, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Roop, I didn't see your hand up there. Thank you. Go ahead.
No problem, Jonathan. I just had a quick question for Diane. Diane, what were some of the different things that you saw across the board in the nation or different states that did allow for, more productivity? I don't want to get off of the focus of what the main things that we discussed today was, but I just wanted to hear your feedback on that.
Yeah, like during the hearings, we can go back to some of the challenges that we're dealing with that's a benefit for the consumer, right? So if we're able to have preventive maintenance, if we're able to have some power backup chairs be able to be repaired and maintained, because we know loaners are a problem. Some of those type of things, like your sister state, Massachusetts, has started doing that. They did that, started it last year, and it's helpful because we know there's a challenge with some of those things, especially after COVID with not enough loaners and preventive maintenance. It stinks that you guys got to wait till you break down to get something done, and we're seeing that in some other states. And those are things that we're looking for. That does help with timelines. It does help with trying to, because everything's pretty much in the home or the facility that we do, and it's routing, and it's just looking at that. And there's some things too that we're talking to the federal level on that too for some things, and the fact that you can't come to our branches. We know that. We love to see paratransit. Massachusetts is doing that now for people to come to their branch to get some assistance, which would help with timelines and stuff like that. Because if you are short-staffed and we're able to get someone in that doesn't work with their time, it's great things to do. I mean, those are things that benefit everybody. But again, we don't have that right now.
Yeah, I do think those are good points for sure. I think preventative maintenance and backup chairs and whatever we could do. I don't know how many countless times I've lent out old chairs of mine, to others. So I do think that's a need as well. But thank you.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Tubman, then we need to wrap up, sir, please.
Okay. Those are great ideas. They were in the task force report from last time. And maybe those are oldies but goodies, but there's a real reason for it. And as you pointed out, in Massachusetts, they may already be doing some of these things. So those could be things in recommendations from this council. Maybe, Diane, I do want to engage in that conversation with you because I think those are great other ideas we should look at.
But again, we did bring this up because again, it's again the financing for it, and Connecticut been at the same budget for over 15 years, so that was why it was kind of stopped. And enforcing it with other, the other insurance groups, of some of those things that we're stuck with. It's got to be something that comes from the state level.
We can certainly recommend it. I know that was said on the floor by Senator Seminara that there's other things that they would have liked to have included in the bill, and for the reason you just said, is the reason they weren't included. But that was last year, and this year things may be different. So I don't think that would be a reason not to make recommendations.
All right, seeing no other comments, again, we'll research into planning the next meeting. We'll let you all know as soon as we can. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Rizzio.
Before we adjourn, you're talking about scheduling the next meeting or the meeting with Representative Gilchrist and others. Do we have a regular meeting next month, or is that also tentative? That will be
that will be a piece of the regular meeting. I think you'd have to do it that way.
Okay.
Wait, I'm confused. So we wouldn't be having that till a month from now?
I'm trying to plan it sooner, but all I said was that it couldn't happen before the election.
Right.
I will,
Okay,
but I will plan it as soon as they are available.
Okay.
Based on their availability.
Right.
So yes, Mr. Garland.
I'll be very quick, I promise. I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today and participating in this process. I know that it is heated and emotional, and very personal for a lot of us. And we've all put in a lot of time and energy and resources. But I want to thank everyone from the advocates and activists and legislators and the industry and the insurance and just everybody else. I'm sure I've forgotten folks, but like, thanks to everybody for being here and being a part of this, because this is important and we're coming at it from different angles, but it's tough at times, but we're making this work and we're making it better. And yeah, thank you all for being a part of this. It's good. And I appreciate you all. And that's all. I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn. Thanks, everyone.